Sunday is Purim. So I guess we should talk a little bit about that. Right? Why not? I'd like to make a comment about Yom Tov generally. That applies to all Yom Tovim, and show that it's especially true with regards to Purim and Yom Kippur. There is a story that's told in the Chumash, in Parshas Vayetze, when Yaakov Avinu was running away from Esav, and he arrives at the Far East, and he comes to a well where the shepherds have gathered to water the sheep. And it says there was a well, and there were 3 flocks of sheep that were besides the well. There was a big stone, and it was necessary for all the flocks to gather so that the shepherds together could remove the stone. So it says in the Pasuk, a very interesting thing, it says that as a rule, normally they would gather, remove the stone, they would give the sheep to drink, and then they would put the stone back. And the Pasuk makes a point of this, that they didn't just give the sheep to drink, but they put the stone back. So in this instance, Yaakov Avinu, when he saw Rachel, he did it all himself. He removed the stone, watered all the sheep, and that was a demonstration of supernatural strength. But as a rule, all the shepherds gathered, the shepherds of the 3 flocks, they would remove the stone, give the sheep to drink, and put the stone back. The Ramban says that this episode, Yaakov's seeing the 3 flocks of sheep, is a remez. It alludes to something. The 3 flocks of sheep symbolize the Jews who gathered in Yerushalayim 3 times a year. As we have Shalosh Regalim, we have the 3 pilgrimage holidays, and the 3 flocks of sheep symbolize that, symbolize this fact that they would gather to the temple 3 times a year. And of course the temple is compared to a spring, because in the same way that we derive our water from a spring, we derive our spiritual sustenance from the Beis HaMikdash. And you have a picture here of the Jews gathering 3 times a year, deriving inspiration. And the Ramban says, and they put the stone back until the next holiday. The Ramban makes a point that putting the stone back is very significant. And that means like this. There are things we do on the holidays. And the question is, if these things are worth doing, why don't we do them all year? For example, on Pesach, we eat matzah and no chametz. So that really is a good idea to have matzah and not chametz, whatever matzah symbolizes, whatever chametz symbolizes, but if there's an idea that for that week we should have matzah and not chametz, so the whole year we should eat matzah and not chametz. If Sukkot, if there's something special about sitting in the sukkah as opposed to living in a house, so the entire year we should live in a sukkah. Right? Why ever live in a house? The answer is that's not the way it's meant to work. There's a hanhaga, there's a way we conduct ourselves on the yontif, but when the yontif comes to an end, the hanhaga comes to an end. We don't do it anymore. So when Pesach is over, there's no more matzah. When Sukkot is over, there's no more sukkah. And that's the point of the story. That if the 3 flocks at the well symbolize the 3 holidays, you put the stone back. At the end of the holiday, you seal it for another year. Come back to Pesach a year later. Come back to Sukkot a year later. Because why is that? There are really 2 answers to this question. One is the more superficial answer, and one is the deeper answer. The superficial answer is because things that you do all the time, you don't appreciate. Because if we would eat matzah all year, we just wouldn't appreciate what the matzah stands for. We appreciate it because it's special. We do it 1 week of the year. If we sit in a sukkah the entire year, we wouldn't appreciate it. We appreciate it because it's something we do 1 week out of the year. That's the superficial answer. The deeper answer is this, is that matzah, the eating of matzah for that week, impresses upon us an idea, a pure idea. God doesn't want us to live in the world of certainty. God wants us to live in the world of challenge. We are not meant to live in a world which is a world of matzah. We're not meant to live in a world which is a world of sukkah. We are meant to live in a world where there are choices. You can have matzah, you can have chametz. You can have a house, you can have a sukkah. How do you know what you should choose or what you should think or what you should feel? So the observance of Pesach teaches us an idea. Right? We reflect on the meaning of matzah, the meaning of chametz. We walk away with that lesson, and we are meant to apply it not in a world which is black and white, but in a world which is very subtle, a world which is nuanced. Because in that world where you can order anything from the menu, you're meant to learn the lesson of Pesach and apply it. In a world where you can live in any type of dwelling, you're meant to apply the lesson of Sukkot. So, for example, the way a person decorates his house, the way a person builds his house, will be informed by the values that he picked up over a Sukkot. Because you live at Sukkot in the Sukkah. Chazal tell us the Sukkah symbolizes Olam Hazeh, this world. That's why it's a diras arai, it's a temporary dwelling. It's meant to give us a perspective on life. It's not that important how lavish your house is, how lavish your car is. We're only here for a very short time. But the Torah doesn't tell us to live in a sukkah year-round. The Torah tells us take the lesson of sukkah and apply it to a world which is very challenging, a world which offers alternatives. You know, you talk about the type of house you should live in. I just have to mention, I once was a guest in someone's house years and years and years ago. And I came for a Shabbos. I was speaking in their shul. And the host was a very wealthy person, lived in a very, very elegant house. And I used the bathroom in the house. And in the bathroom there were 2 stacks of magazines. One stack of magazines were magazines that probably should not have been in a Jewish home in any case. You know, if you go down the aisle in the supermarket, you can find them. And the other one was a stack of magazines, Home Beautiful and House and Garden and so on and so forth. So I looked at one of those, right, and I saw in it a picture of a dream bathroom. What was the dream bathroom? Now, look, all of us, you know, we all have this Yetzer Hara to read in the bathroom, right? The bathroom was like this. The room was massive, probably larger than this room. There was one glass wall that faced a forest. Life of me, I don't know why in the world you want to have a glass wall facing the forest. There was a wall of books. This is what I really like to read in the bathroom. The library. And in addition to the toilet, there was also a leather recliner. So that if the person wanted to stay a while and read more, he wouldn't have to sit on the stiff seat. He could move over to the it was beautiful. So I looked at this picture and I said, you know, in my dreams I never imagined there'd be such a bathroom. And after you read this article, you think to yourself, how could I ever be satisfied with my bathroom? No. Anyway, I left, and the host was waiting for me. And the host, he was very embarrassed, very apologetic, because he should have checked the bathroom because he realized what was there. So he apologized for the magazine. So I say, which pile were you apologizing for? So, anyway, the point is that if you observe a sukkah, the way a sukkah should be, your house is different. Your house is different. The way you decorate it, the way you build it, the way you furnish it. It's different. You just don't have that sense of this world being that important. And of course, I would imagine it's the same thing with the way we eat. If you go through a Pesach and really think about the matzah, you're not going to get a job as the restaurant reviewer for the New York Times. I mean, that's not going to be your aspiration, to eat everything, try everything, taste everything. Matzah is good enough. So, okay, we don't eat matzah the whole year, but we don't have to overdo it. So therefore, it's not that we're meant to carry forward the hanhaga. We're not supposed to act the entire year the way we act on Pesach. We're not supposed to act on the entire year the way we act on Sukkot. In other words, there's a very limited period. We put the stone back. When Pesach is over, we put the stone on the well for another year. When Sukkot is over, we put the stone on the well for another year. But we take forward the lessons. And that's what the symbolism is. And it's a very, very, very powerful idea. In other words, it's not that, if we only had the spiritual strength, we would have Pesach the entire year, and we would have Sukkot the entire year, and this is a concession to human weakness that God lets us do all these things the rest of the year. Now, it's not meant to be that way. We're meant to live in a world where there are alternatives, where there are challenges, where we're meant to grapple with decisions. We're meant to take the inspiration of Pesach and the inspiration of Sukkot forward. But at least in the theoretical sense, it would be possible to eat matzah the whole year, and it would be possible to sit in the sukkah the entire year. It would be possible. There are two Yom Tovim, there are two holidays where this is obviously so, that it is impossible to practice what we do on those holidays the entire year. One, of course, is Yom Kippur, right? Yom Kippur, we don't eat, we don't drink. It would be inconceivable that a person should say that we are meant to take the conduct of Yom Kippur and carry it forward the entire year. As we all understand here, there's nothing to question. Obviously, Yom Kippur is something which is unique to Yom Kippur. When Yom Kippur is over, Yom Kippur is over. Obviously, there are lessons we are meant to learn. But when Yom Kippur is over, Yom Kippur is over. And the other is Purim. Purim we also can't take forward the entire year. Because the avoda of Purim, the way of Purim, is chayav inish l'besume b'puraya. A person is obligated to become intoxicated on Purim ad lo yada, to the point that he divests himself of rationality.
Akashverosh tried.
Right? Not successfully. You can't carry that forward. Right? A person has to have das. A person has to be rational. A person has to use his intelligence. And you can't survive in this world. So obviously, the idea of Yom Kippur and Purim is not that somehow we are meant to make the entire year Yom Kippur or the entire year Purim. It means that we're meant to take a lesson from the observance of Yom Kippur and from the observance of Purim, carry it forward in a year which has its challenges and where things are not black and white. Now, I think it's safe to say this, that Yom Kippur, at least one of the issues we grapple with in Yom Kippur, is the challenge of desire. In other words, as human beings, in as much as we are human beings, there are certain things we desire. We desire food, we desire drink, etc., etc., etc. We desire certain forms of pleasure and comfort. Yom Kippur, these are forbidden. So we are meant to learn lessons. That we have the potential to live on a higher plane. And therefore, when we partake of these pleasures and we indulge these desires the entire year, it has to be with a focus on the spiritual dimension. And we learn from Yom Kippur that we are not compelled, we are not animals who must follow their impulses and follow their instincts. If you can observe Yom Kippur, then you can be careful and scrupulous in how you eat and how you drink and in every other area of life the entire year, not, again, to deny the body its desires the way we do on Yom Kippur, but that a person should live with a sense of control, a sense of discipline. That certainly is something that we can pick up from Yom Kippur. Purim deals with a different challenge, which is the challenge of das, the challenge of rationality. And at first glance, we would think that rationality is a great thing. What is better than rationality? But the reality is that rationality, the ability to calculate, to reason, brings with it many, many disadvantages. Many, many tsaras come as a consequence of rationality. The pasuk says in Kehelas, Yosef das, Yosef machal. The more rationality you have, the more intelligence you have, the more pain you have. You see, one of the things that happens when we use our rationality is that we no longer feel deeply about anything. We no longer feel deeply with deep convictions about anything. Because instead of feeling, instead we decide on the basis of rational considerations what position we should take on a given matter. Think of a politician. In other words, politicians, when they embark on their careers, may have convictions. But once they get into office, what is the most important concern of a politician?
Get reelected.
Re-election, right? So now when he has to stake his positions, what is he really doing? He's reasoning. Because what position should I take in order to guarantee, or at least maximize the likelihood of my re-election? Now that's a rational consideration. That's das. And what happens is that you have a politician who, after a while, is a chameleon. He'll be whatever he has to be to win the votes. And sometimes, he will change in midstream. Forgive me, I'm a political science major, but but this is a known fact in American politics that primary voters, people who vote in the primaries, usually are the diehards of the party. Now, who's going to vote in a Democratic primary? The people who really buy into the Democrat ideology. Who's going to vote in a Republican primary? The people who buy into the Republican ideology. But it's a known fact that general elections are really determined by the middle-of-the-road voters. Because if you examine the electorate, you probably have equal percentages of real liberals and real conservatives. But you have the 20 or 30% of people in the middle that really make the difference. So therefore, it's a known thing. This is a cliche, but it's obvious that if a person wants to be president, in the primary campaign, when he's running for the nomination, he should stake an extreme position to win the party faithful and get the nomination. In the general election, he has to veer towards the center in order to win the swing votes. His party faithful will vote for him no matter what. But victory belongs to the person who can win the center. So you have a person that in the primary campaign, in the run-up to the nomination, is an extreme liberal or an extreme conservative to win his party. And then when it comes to the general election, he has to present himself as the centrist to win those votes, which are the key to victory. So you wonder, why are people cynical about politicians? So of course they're cynical, because they don't believe anything. Why don't they believe anything? Because their approach to decision making is das. It's rational, right? What do I need to do to get this accomplished? The most cynical example of a das calculation is the calculation which is known as Pascal's wager. In other words, Pascal was a philosopher and a mathematician, Blaise Pascal, and he made a cheshbon as follows. He said like this: should a person live a religious life, or should a person not live a religious life? Let's say a person has no belief at all. He doesn't know whether God exists. God doesn't exist. He's an agnostic. So what should he do? So Pascal said that there's a very good calculation for living a religious life. Why? Because if he lives the secular life, the irreligious life, what if God does exist? So there are terrible consequences. He'll be condemned to eternal Gehenna. So therefore it's better for him to live the religious life and have eternal bliss. What if there's no God? So no harm done. What did he give up? He gave up some minor pleasures for the sake of his religion. But the payoff is certainly much better living the religious life, just in case God does exist. I mean, that was his cheshbon. But you have to ask yourself the question, like, what type of religious life would that be, right? If it's really just a calculation, if it's just like, playing the odds. Now, it makes sense that I should keep Pesach and keep Shabbos and keep kosher, etc., etc. Why? Just in case God does exist. I don't really know, right? But just in case, I'll hedge my bets. I mean, there's no passion, there's no drive, there's no conviction, there's no feeling, there's no fervor, there's no nothing, right? You're just going through the motions because that's how you're going to get what you want to get. That's das. That's das. And the pasuk says a very frightening thing. The pasuk says, "Elokim also esarim yasher," that God made people straight. V'hema bikshu cheshvonos rabba, but they sought many calculations. Sometimes we are so busy calculating that we don't even remember. We can't figure out what it is we do believe, and that's very tragic. It may be that deep down we do have convictions, but. Imagine the workaholic who has calculated that if he wants to retire with a tidy nest egg, he's going to have to work very, very hard, 6 days a week, long hours in the office, and he has no choice. And he lives his life accordingly. Maybe he does love his children. But after making this calculation, he probably will have to talk himself into believing he doesn't love them, or at least doesn't want to spend any time with them. Because otherwise, how will he live with himself? I mean, there's so many things we do because we figure this is the right thing to do. We've made a cheshbon, we've made a calculation. We've used our das to chart a course, but it's really not something I feel for, not something I want, not anything I have passion for. I mean, how many people have chosen careers on the basis of das considerations, rational considerations? You meet people who are artistic, people who are spirited, but they tell themselves there's no money to be made in that. They're not going to put bread on the table. So instead, they become accountants and the like. Now, I'm not against accountants. If you love doing that, then kol hakavod, by all means do it. I know people that love doing it. I know our yeshiva's accountant loves being an accountant. So it's okay. If you like it, then do it by all means. But how many people do it and can't stand it? I remember when I was sitting shiva for my father's Zechron Livracha, one of the people that came was a man who I'd known all my life. He was our family's barber. And, I had my hair cut with him many times. I mean, until I left home to go to yeshiva. But when I visited vacations, I got a haircut there. But this is one of the first times I really had a chance to talk to him. A real conversation. This time he had retired already. He was in his 80s. And I asked him, I says, tell me, Peter, his name was Peter. He says, did you like being a barber? He said, I hated every minute of it. So how'd you become a barber? He says, he came as an immigrant, right? And he had no skills, no education, no training. He figured this is something he could do. So he went to a barber shop. I guess this was in the days before you had to be licensed, or maybe, I don't know. He came in, and he offered his services. So the owner of the barber shop says to him, tell me, did you have a shop in the old country? So he says, mm-hmm. So he says, how many chairs did you have? So I got 4 chairs. I had 4 chairs. He says to me, in the kitchen. Anyway, so his first few haircuts weren't so good. After a while, he picked it up. And he was a barber. For decades, he was a barber. But, this was a person whose passion, interestingly, was for gardening. He loved plants. He loved gardening. And he had a green thumb. He was good at it. But, there wasn't much money made in gardening. So they became a barber, which he hated his whole life. That's what das does to you. That's what rationality does to you. Can you live without it? No, you can't live without it. Right? But once in a while, you need to get in touch with your real self.
That's it, I quit.
To find what it is you really feel, what it is that is really important to you. And so one day a year we divest ourselves of das. We divest ourselves of das. And that's Purim. And amazing things are discovered on Purim. Chazal say, when the wine goes in, the secrets come out. And a lot of those secrets aren't just secrets to other people, they're the secrets to yourself. They're the things you don't know about yourself come out. The fact that you have passion, and you have drive, and you have interests, and you have curiosity, and you have a sense of wonder. These are things that sometimes only emerge when a person is, so to speak, in his cups, as the expression goes. The question is, why is this a Purim subject? What does it do with Purim? Because I understand that once a year, maybe it's a good idea that everyone should drink a little bit and kind of divest himself of that rationality that messes up so. But what does that have to do with Purim? Now, there are many aspects to this. But one aspect is, because this is exactly what Amalek is. Because Amalek, which is our arch enemy, and Purim, of course, as Chazal tell us, is only one of a chain of battles against Amalek. Amalek is that force, believe it or not, that weakens our convictions. The Pasuk says about Amalek, Asher karcha baderech. And Rashi says karcha means they cooled us off. They cooled us off. How does Amalek cool us off? Because Amalek cools us off because Amalek forces us to doubt our convictions. Everything becomes a doubt. Sfarim HaKadoshim tell us Amalek is b'gematria safek. Amalek, the numerical value of Amalek equals that of safek. Safek means doubt. Amalek attacks us when we are in doubt. You know, the pasuk says before the war, the first war against Amalek, that the Jews themselves had a question: Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu l'mayim? Is God in our midst or not? Now, they're going through the desert. They had challenges, lack of food, lack of water, and they finally had a question: Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu? Is God in our midst or not? So anyone that reads the Chumash wonders, how could anyone suspect? How could anyone raise a doubt on such a fundamental question? I mean, after all, these Jews witnessed 10 plagues in Mitzrayim. They witnessed the splitting of the Yam Suf. They witnessed the falling of the Mun. They witnessed the miraculous spring of water. Right? How could they have doubted such a fundamental thing? But the truth is, that's part of our experience as well. There are things that really we should believe with a very deep conviction. And we also begin to doubt. We also begin to question. So, for example, our right to possess Eretz Yisrael, the right of the Jewish people to possess Eretz Yisrael, is there anything that should be more clear to a Jew than that? That we have a right to possess Eretz Yisrael? That we have a right to defend ourselves? But the modern day Amalekim have forced us to question that. I once heard someone speak, and he said that really Israel could solve all its problems in a few days. The problem is the Amalekim that published the New York Times. That's the problem. And there's truth to that. There's truth to that. In other words, you read the New York Times long enough, right? You begin to doubt your basic premises. Do we have a right? Do we have a right to self-defense? Do we have to wait until they bomb us? Do we have to wait until they kill us? You know, just a few days ago, there's a terrorist attack in Itamar, and you read, how is this reported on the BBC? no mention of the word terror. And of course, there has to be a mention that Israel is occupying land in counter distinction to international law and so on and so forth. Right? They didn't show you the pictures of rivers of blood on the scene of that massacre. So the Amalekim, right, begin to doubt our basic convictions, and then when we doubt, then we begin making calculations. So what should we do? What should we believe? What position should we take? How should we act? And that's when all the trouble starts, right? Because we are not in touch with that which we should feel deeply and that which we should know intuitively. Instead, everything becomes a calculation. And the calculations, unfortunately, in our modern world are what will please the decision makers, what will please the people who do read the New York Times, what will please the people in Washington, what will please the international community, and so on and so forth. And we find ourselves acting in ways that are just counter to our own interests. Because of dimyonis, we have this fantasy that if we please the State Department, everything is going to be fine. And then our problems will be solved. So instead of standing up and defending our right to our land, right, instead we have these cheshbonos that, no, we have to appease the diplomats and the bureaucrats in Washington. And if they tell us, no, not to defend ourselves, that's what we have to do. I mean, it's just bizarre. But that is exactly what happens when das replaces true conviction. And it can lead you to things that question things that are so basic, that should be so obvious. That Jews should go through the experience of Yetzias Mitzrayim and Kriyas Yamsuf and the Mun and the Be'er, the miraculous spring of water, and have a question, is Hashem in our midst or not? That's when Amalek attacks. Amalek attacks when we are in a state of doubt. And if you need any proof of this, look at the Haftarah. The Haftarah of this week's Parsha, this Parsha Zohar, tells the story of another war, the next war against Amalek, that was conducted by Shaul HaMelech. And again, if we read our Bible faithfully, then we know that Amalek is a nation that we must feel hatred for in the extreme. And we are commanded to the point of obliteration. We find Shaul HaMelech himself has compassion. He begins to feel. And according to Chazal, if you read the Gemara, you begin to really, really wonder. It says, Vayarev Banachal. It says that Shaul contended with Amalek, with the nation of Amalek in the valley. So the Gemara says, what does this mean? They contended in the valley? Al Iskei Nachal. They contended over a halacha that pertains to a valley. What halacha pertains to a valley? There's a halacha in the Torah of Egla Rufa, that if a body is found, a murder victim, and we don't know who the killer is, so the closest city takes a calf, breaks its neck, reenacts the murder, and all the people, the elders of that city, have to make a declaration that we are not responsible for the killing. So Shaul HaMelech said, you see, the Torah has such a concern for a loss of a single human life. How is it possible that I should be called upon to wage war against Amalek and wipe out an entire nation? Now, that's a very good theoretical question, but the Torah says Timcha Zecher Amalek, and it says Egla Rufa. And the obvious answer is that this is God's prerogative. Right? God's prerogative is to decide who deserves to live and who deserves to die. That's why I say, by the way, I don't know if you want to put this on the video. If you don't believe Torah is min hashamayim, if you don't believe Torah is given by God, then the Torah is an immoral book. Because if the Torah says Timcha Zecher Amalek, obliterate this nation, So why are we better than anybody else? We also advocate genocide. Right? The answer is we believe Torah is ben Hashemayim. We believe, therefore, that this is God's prerogative. If God determines that this nation has forfeited its right to exist, then we are doing God's work. So someone asked me, so what if the Muslims make the same claim? You're 100% right. Right? The only way to respond to that is by demonstrating that the Judaism is true and Islam is false. Whereas, but if you take the position that everything is true or everything is false, then the truth is it's very hard to differentiate. But in any case, this is something that Shaul should have understood. But Shaul, he argued from the Eglah Rufa that there should be a mitzvah to wage war, a war to the bitter end against Amalek, is inconsistent with the Torah's morality. So the Gemara says the heavenly voice came out and said, Al titzdak harveh. Don't be so religious. Don't be so frum. No, don't make these calculations. But that's what happens. What happens is when you lose touch with what should be your deepest convictions, and you begin to use that power of das, that power of rationalization, then all there is confusion. There is cloudiness.
Isn't the decision that Shaul made almost the flip side of the one that Abraham made?
Which decision?
With Yitzchak.
With the Akedah.
Yeah.
In a way it is. Right? In a way it is the opposite. Now, it is a complicated story, but if God says do it, you do it.
You have to disregard his calculations.
You have to do it.
Sure.
There are other ways to that's how Kierkegaard understands it. But we discussed that that's a much more complex picture. But this is the idea. Amalek is the nation which rises against us when we lose touch with our own deepest convictions. When we are cooled off, when we lose our passion, we lose our clarity. Amalek is the nation that rises against us. And Mechias Amalek, to obliterate Amalek, not only on the physical level, but on the ideological level, requires us getting in touch with our deepest convictions. And that's what Ad Lo Yada means. That sometimes in order to find out what it is we truly believe, we have to divest ourselves of this element of das that not everything has to be a calculation. Certain things have to be things that you just feel deeply because they resonate with your neshama. That's what Purim is all about. Yes?
Doesn't extreme rationality sometimes cloud your emotion? Like you're saying almost like you should let your emotions or your passion rule, but then your passion can cloud your thinking.
I'm saying is I'm not talking about emotion in terms of likes and dislikes. I'm talking about the deep down, right? We all have convictions. There are things we know to be true, right? And we argue ourselves out of them. We convince ourselves that we should reject them because they don't have cash value. They don't pay off. They don't help us. So we talk ourselves to things that we know, we should know are wrong, we should know are mistaken, but we convince ourselves through rational argument. Ultimately creating a monster who doesn't believe anything, who has no true convictions at all. Right? Purim is a time that we discover what it is we truly believe. Now there's another aspect to this, which is that sometimes our rationality gets us into trouble. Because sometimes, despite our best efforts to make good decisions, right, we make the wrong decisions. And we make decisions that have dire consequences. Now, the Purim story is a story of bad decisions. Certainly, the bad decisions of Haman. And that we all know. Right? There was Haman thought he was very, very, very smart, and he reasoned that he has a plan. He'll deal with Mordechai in the way that he did, and everything will be perfect. and of course he masterminded his own execution. Right? The Gemara says that he went to Achashverosh to get permission to hang Mordechai alo eitz asher hechin lo, on the gallows that he prepared for him. So the Gemara says that the correct translation is the gallows he prepared for himself. Right? It was really everything he was doing backfired to the point that he built the gallows really to hang himself. So the Maharal says this is the deep meaning of the pasuk v'nahafaychu. It says in the Megillah that on the day that the enemies were meant to overpower the Jews, v'nahafaychu, everything was turned over. Asher yishlutu haYehudim heim v'sinayim, that the Jews overpowered their enemies. So it was the opposite. Everything is topsy-turvy. In other words, everything you think, everything you plan backfires, and the exact opposite of what you intended comes true. But it's also a story of bad Jewish decisions. Because if you read the Megillah very carefully, and you read the Chazal explain the Megillah, you discover that the Jews of this time found themselves in a situation where they genuinely thought they had been abandoned by God. They thought that the 70 years of the Golus Bavel had passed, the time of the promised redemption had passed, and God had abandoned them. And therefore it was necessary to ingratiate themselves to the powers that be. In this instance, Achashverosh. And therefore, if Achashverosh makes a party, it's very important for political influence to align with power, and attend the party. There was one person who objected, according to Chazal, and that was Mordechai. Mordechai was the Gadol Hador. He was the greatest rabbinic sage of the generation. And he told him this would be a catastrophic sin to attend this party. And everyone said, Mordechai is a crackpot. If we don't go, who knows what will happen? There'll be terrible consequences. And of course, the way the party unfolded only confirmed that his own queen, for her refusal to come, was executed. Imagine what he would have done had a bunch of Jews refused to come. Wouldn't have hesitated. And sure enough, the party is over. And what happens? Because of this terrible so-called sin? Absolutely nothing. The decree of Haman was made in the 9th year of the reign of Achashverosh. The party was in the 3rd year, so there was a gap of 6 years. When we read the Megillah, it takes a half hour. So it seems one thing follows the next, but really there's a gap of 6 years. So over 6 years, no one connects the dots. Right? No one thinks, why is Haman able to make a decree against the Jews? Because 6 years ago we committed a sin. No one thinks that way. Everyone thinks that everything should be 1, 2, 3, cause and effect. If there's a lapse of 6 years, no one connects that what's happening now is the consequence happened 6 years ago. So, if anything, they said, the cause of our current problem is again that troublemaker Mordechai. Right? He refuses to bow down to Haman, and sure enough, the decree follows like that. The next day, there's a lottery, a date is selected, letters are sent. So you tell me, what's the cause of the calamity? This accusation, this canard that 6 years ago we went to this illicit party, or Mordechai acted like a fool and offending Haman. They had it all figured out. Of course, the truth is that as the story unfolds, we see the exact opposite. Mordechai is vindicated. They are shown to be wrong. And Mordechai really was correct. And therefore Mordechai, bidei Shemayim, at the hands of heaven, is lifted to the highest position in the kingdom, one notch below the king. So, the Jews also made plenty of bad decisions. And they had to be saved from themselves. And that's the danger of das. That when we rely on das, we rely on our own intelligence, even doing counter to that which we know is correct in a moral and religious sense, we are dooming ourselves. We are really causing ourselves irreparable damage. The Maharal says that this is the idea of ad lo yada. The idea of ad lo yada is to understand that our salvation, our success, is really in the hands of the Ribono Shel Olam. Is really in the hands of the Ribono Shel Olam. And we have to see ourselves as fundamentally helpless. If a person thinks he's so smart, I can solve any problem and get myself out of any bind, right? He probably will make a bad decision at some point, and that will be the end of him. Because a person has to know that success, victory, everything we hope for is really a gift from the Ribono Shel Olam. Of course, we have to exert effort, that it shouldn't be a open miracle, but ultimately everything we have, all our successes, all our joys, all our triumphs, are really a credit to what Ribono Shel Olam bestows upon us. And that's really what Ad Lo Yada is. By analogy, let me give you another illustration of this. When we pray, so there's always the big question, what do you do with your hands? What do you do with your hands when you're down in Shemona Esrei? The Gemara says in Masechah Shabbos that Rava used to clasp his hands like this. Rava pacha yadei umasi, he would clasp his hands. So what is the idea of clasping your hands? So the Ran says in this Chidushim, the idea of clasping your hands is because that is a stance of helplessness, as if you have no hands, right? If your hands are detached from each other, you can move your hands, you can use your hands, that means you are empowered. If you hold your hands together, if one hand is holding the other, that means it's as if you have no hands. Look, man, no hands. Right? That means you are helpless. And when we stand in prayer before God, that's exactly what we want to express. But we don't want to stand before God and say, listen, Ribono Shel Olam, I can take care of myself as long as you don't interfere. Just butt out of my business and everything will be fine. That is not the message we want to send when we're praying. Right? When we pray to God, we want to express to God that we are absolutely helpless. We are totally dependent and reliant on you. And not only are we meant to say it, we're meant to feel it. By the way, it's not just that this is what we're saying. God knows if we mean it or not. But this is really the stance of prayer. This is what we are saying when we pray. This is what we're saying on Purim as well. With Purim, we recognize that our entire salvation, our entire hatzlacha, our entire success is really God's gift to us. It's not because of the good decisions we've made. It's not because of the wise investments we've made. Right? It's because God watches over us. We are His people. He loves us. He cares for us. And we demonstrate that by, in a sense, making ourselves helpless by divesting ourselves of das. So I said to the boys staying in Yeshiva that this Maral provides a wonderful metric to measure how much or how little a person should drink. Because it's a very fine line. I'll give you a mashal. Let's say you go to a person who has drunk, and you ask him to give you a ride. Give me a ride. Take me somewhere. So on one level, the person understands that his judgment is impaired, and he'll tell you, I can't drive you. This is why. No, I had to drink. I don't think I could keep the car, in a straight line. I can't drive. Right? That is exactly where the person should be on Purim. In other words, he understands that he has divested himself of das. He's divested himself of that rationality because he understands that really he is in God's hands. But what about the person who's had so much to drink that he's overconfident? And he says, sure, I'll give you a ride. I can do anything. In other words, that boldness is the exact opposite of the point. In other words, if he's had so much to drink that he feels he's on top of the world, he can do anything, there's no challenge, there's no mountain he can't climb, right? That is the exact opposite of what the Ad Lo Yada is meant to be. So the Maral's vertical, the Maral's pshat, really tells us exactly how much the person has to drink. In other words, if he's at the point where his rationality is not impaired at all, he hasn't had enough, right? If he's at the point where he's overconfident and believes he can do anything, he's had too much. In other words, the point is to be at that point where he understands that the decision he would make now will be a bad decision, but that's okay, because he's in God's hands. Not that you can live that way the entire year, but for one day you can taste what it is to be under God's hashgacha. And as we said before, and one of the fringe benefits of that is that that's also a wonderful time for discovering what it is you truly believe. What are your deepest convictions? What are your values? Right? In other words, instead of my beliefs and convictions being crowded out by all the calculations I make, Purim is a day of no calculations. Right? It's a day where I can truly be in touch with my deepest values, my deepest convictions. And that's something which is very special. That's the antithesis of Amalek. Amalek clouds our convictions. It creates suffix, it creates doubt, it creates a lack of passion, because it's very hard to be passionate over calculations. It's really very, very difficult, as we said about the politicians. Purim is a day for putting all that aside. So it's really a very, very, very special day. And I think some of the ideas we talked about there are a little serious, which itself is very difficult on Purim. Purim is a day that doesn't always lend itself to serious reflection. But if you can take 5 minutes out on Purim and think serious thoughts, it'll make a big difference. And Be'ez Hashem, everyone should have a very, very happy and a meaningful Purim. The Gemara says that the Rebbe natan atiyah b'Purim. Rebbe planted a tree on Purim. So the Gemara discusses, are you allowed to do that, not allowed to do that? So the Gemara says, even if you're not allowed to do that, it wasn't the problem, because this was in the Atiyah Shel Simcha. This was a tree that gave him unusual joy. Well, she explains it was a tree whose branches covered a terrace where he sat, provided shade, so it was something that he had satisfaction from. But the Sfas Emes teaches, the Gemara translates it this way, that in Atiyah Shel Simcha, in Purim, we can plant a plant of joy. As we can plant joy for the entire year. It can take root, and the joy of the Purim can carry forward. And God knows we need simcha. Our lives are sometimes so miserable, so wretched. To have an Atiyah Shel Simcha, a day in which we can plant joy for the entire year, is something we should certainly savor. So, Be'ez Hashem, everyone should have a very happy Purim. Next week, Monday night, we'll be able to review it and see how it was. And hopefully it should be believe Peg without incident. If you see someone that's had a little to drink, make sure he doesn't drive. We want it to be a safe Purim, and Chas v'Shalom, there shouldn't be any pain, injuries, or hurt. It should be a day of celebration and joy for all of us. Take care.